I grabbed the tall stranger's hand in the busy hospital lobby. My voice was very tiny. "Please don't go, you smell like my real dad." James Carter stopped moving. He had never met me before. Across the big hallway, my mommy marched toward him, looking freezing cold like she wanted to squash a bad bug. "Security," Mommy snapped. "Get him out." But I only squeezed his hand tighter, hiding my face against his leg, crying like I was super scared of losing my safe place. Then one tiny little thing changed the whole story. James was the kind of grown-up who stayed quiet and never made a fuss. He was 33, doing his work so softly that adults thought he just didn't care. He knew a secret, that the loudest grown-up in the room was almost never the one who actually helped. That Tuesday morning, he came to Meridian Private Hospital before 7 o'clock. He had his heavy tools and a folded paper peeking out of his shirt pocket. Just a routine hospital maintenance day. A big air machine on Mommy's fancy 4th floor had been broken for 2 whole days. The building boss said it wasn't important, but ignoring little things makes them turn into giant, expensive problems. And James never ever let little problems turn into giant, scary ones. He wrote his name at the back door and rode the worker elevator. Nobody even looked at him. That is just how it usually happened. Grown-ups who fix things are kind of invisible to everyone else. Just there enough to keep things working, but not there enough for anyone to ever say hello. James didn't mind at all. Being invisible was kind of a secret superpower. You get to see a whole lot more when nobody is looking. He was super amazing at fixing things, even though he never ever bragged about it. He understood how big machines work the way other people just know happy songs. Like a giant puzzle where every piece connects, if you just sit still and watch it carefully. He used to go to a big school to build things, but he kept it secret. He got his fancy paper, used it briefly. But then something very sad happened, and he just didn't care about being important anymore. His wife Rachel went to heaven having their baby 4 years ago. Their little baby girl, who they named Lily, was totally okay. But Rachel was not. James walked right out carrying his tiny baby in a yellow blanket. He never talked about that sad night ever again. He gave away their nice apartment. They moved to a quiet street. And he made a tiny quiet life that was strong, the way sad people build walls to stay perfectly safe. He was a single father. He read to Lily every night. He learned to make pretty braids by watching the exact same video 37 times until it was perfect. He packed her little lunchbox perfectly every single day, and whenever she started to cry, he hugged her tight because he knew the point wasn't to magically make the bad feelings go away, but to make sure she never had to cry all alone. That morning, walking up the stairs to the 4th floor with his heavy toolbox, he was only thinking about fixing that broken air machine. His adult mind wasn't dwelling on yesterday. You and I know his adult brain couldn't predict the hour's beautiful twist. We grown-ups rarely see miracles coming. The 4th floor VIP wing was eerily quiet, empty of staff and full of wide halls, a space built to fake comfort instead of showing real hospital panic. James had worked in this exact hallway twice. Both times, he dealt with a stubborn vent issue his team kept bandaging instead of actually curing. His logical adult brain just wanted to fix it right, pulling panels to crawl inside the dusty ductwork. A gritty maintenance job that would easily burn 2 hours. He had just settled in. He dropped his toolbox by the wall when tiny rapid footsteps broke the quiet. It was that pure rhythm of a little kid sprinting blindly just to feel the rush. He stood tall and looked. The little girl looked 5, dark hair messy, swimming inside a baggy blue hospital gown made for adults. She held the wild energy of a kid who felt trapped in her boring room. She finally found a tiny, unguarded moment and took off for a grand, brave escape. She sprinted down the whole hall without watching, then suddenly glanced up and froze completely. She halted so fast she almost tumbled over. James just waited patiently. Raising his own kid taught him that children read strangers using pure, instant intuition. And rushing that silent judgment is the absolute worst thing an adult can do. She locked eyes with him, offering that deep, unfiltered focus only a child's pure heart possesses. Then she marched straight across the hall, reached her tiny arms up, and hugged his waist tight. He froze entirely. "You smell just like my real dad," she mumbled into his shirt. Her tiny voice held zero doubt. No confusion at all, no struggling to piece together a blurry, faded memory. It was a child speaking pure truth as naturally as if she were simply pointing out the blue sky. James stared down at this little girl. He couldn't push away. He wasn't scared of a kid, just profoundly confused. Yet beneath his adult logic hid a deep magnetic pull he couldn't even start to label. Let's face it, a child's heart always senses the truth before grown-up brains ever catch up. "Hey," he murmured softly. "What's your name, kiddo?" "Ava," she answered, hugging tighter. "Ava, where are your nurses hiding?" "I don't know." She tilted her small face up to study him. Her gray-green eyes were piercingly direct, sparking a mysterious familiarity his logical mind simply couldn't figure out yet. "You aren't going to leave me, are you?" He checked the hallway. A few hospital nurses had frozen. 2 staff members were rushing over, one already nervously clutching her security radio. The magical escape was over. "Your mom must be terrified," James gently told her. "She's always worried," Ava stated purely, refusing to let him go. Charlotte Sinclair stormed in under 2 minutes flat. You see, his adult logic still couldn't decode the pure truth. A totally strange kid clinging to his tool belt while hospital workers formed a very cautious circle around them. Then he heard her sharp heels, the fast, bossy clicking of an executive owning the sterile hospital floor. He glanced up. The CEO was surprisingly young, maybe pushing 30. Dressed in a flawless business suit even here. She obviously sprinted straight out of a boardroom, an expensive tablet clamped under one arm. Mommy ran so fast her dark jacket was all messed up. Mommy definitely wasn't just visiting. Whatever she did in this giant hospital, she was the absolute boss. She looked right at me first, then glared at the nice man. Her face changed super fast and she wasn't happy to see me at all, Ava. That one sharp word made all the busy hospital nurses freeze right in their tracks. Then, staring right at him, she ordered, "Security." "Ma'am, I'm security," Mommy repeated coldly. She turned to a scared nurse. "Who is this person? How did he access this floor?" He lifted his hand a tiny bit, not surrendering. He just looked like a grown-up who knew he had to explain things really carefully. "I'm a maintenance technician. I have a work order for the ventilation unit in this corridor. I can show you my ID and the order number. I don't care." Mommy was already rushing toward me, kneeling down and whispering so quietly. "Ava, come here." I just refused to move. I loosened my arms around his waist, but I still wouldn't let him go completely. I looked right at Mommy with the totally calm face of a kid who has already made my choice, and I'm just waiting for all the grown-ups to understand. "He smells like Daddy," I whispered. Mommy's serious face didn't change, but something deep inside her eyes flickered for a second, just like a dark, scary shadow moving across a quiet pond. "Come here," Mommy said again. I reached out and grabbed Mommy's hand, but I kept my other tiny hand wrapped super tight around his rough shirt sleeve. And when Mommy tried really gently to pull me away, I squeezed his arm tighter and started crying. It wasn't fake tears just to get my way. It was real, scared crying because they were pulling me from someone I actually needed. The big security guard finally showed up. He stared at him. He just looked right back and stayed totally quiet. One of the older hospital doctors, a nice man with gray hair who was watching from a doorway, suddenly stepped right up. He mumbled to himself very quietly. "She doesn't respond that way to strangers." In my clinical experience, this kind of attachment in a child this young is almost always, "Thank you, doctor." "Warren," Mommy snapped. Her voice sounded like a slamming door. "I didn't ask." The guards locked him in their boring office for 40 whole minutes. It was a dark little room downstairs by the back doors, with only 2 chairs. One simple table and the loud buzzing of the hospital machines inside the walls. A big security guard sat across from him, staring at his worker badge like he had done this boring job a million times. He answered every single question honestly. He had 0 secrets, so he just told the total truth, sounding like he was fixing a broken hospital pipe. Simple, clear, and without making stuff up. They checked his work papers completely. His worker badge matched the hospital's computer exactly. They searched his background through the company rules, but they found absolutely nothing bad. The guard finally thanked him and said he could leave, but told him to grab his heavy tools and stay off our 4th floor for the rest of the day. They said another worker would come fix the broken vent instead. James just nodded, heading upstairs to grab his maintenance toolbox. The hospital hallway felt much quieter. The doctors had scattered. Down at the far end, right by the window overlooking the concrete parking garage. He noticed CEO Charlotte Sinclair kneeling in front of her daughter, murmuring something in a hushed, serious voice. We've all seen that look, a kid patiently listening to an adult, knowing the truth but staying totally quiet. James was almost out of sight when little Ava finally looked up. The girl moved fast, way too fast for her mother. She darted across the hall and grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said. He froze completely. The child wasn't looking at his face but staring right at his chest, just below the collarbone. His work shirt had slipped open there, showing off the thin cord of an old leather necklace. Ava reached out her little hand, treating it like glass. Her tiny fingers brushed the pendant. It was a worn hexagonal piece of metal, completely rubbed smooth from years of touching. To anyone else, it was nothing. An object that only gathers meaning because it stays close to a beating human heart. "He had this," little Ava whispered. Her voice sounded breathless. "My dad had this." James stared down at the metal. The adult had worn it so long, he was completely blind to it. He found it during a dark time he buried away and never thought about. He kept it in a coat pocket for months before stringing it on that cord, needing it physically close to his skin. Charlotte stepped up right behind her little girl. James glanced up, catching the wealthy CEO watching him with a very strange look. For one split second, the polished executive dropped her icy armor. "You and I know that flash of fear adults get when a truth hits them way too fast." It hammered right against the emotional walls she had built. Then she shut down completely. "Ava," she snapped, "that's enough." She pulled the child back down the hospital hallway in total silence. James just stood there in the empty hall, the metal pendant burning into his hand. The grown man had squeezed it tight without even realizing. He lingered there long after they left, and sleep never came for him that night. The single father sat alone at a tiny kitchen table in his rundown rented house. His daughter Lily slept nearby, the dinner plates washed and put away. That rigid adult order where a life is just being managed instead of actually lived. He poured a cold glass of water but never drank a drop. The kitchen window offered him only pitch blackness and his own exhausted, haunted face. His mind kept looping back to Ava's innocent face, ignoring the sudden, desperate hug entirely. Even though that hug was shocking enough, he ignored the necklace too. Even though that little detail dug into his brain like a painful, hidden splinter, the real secret was something much smaller than all that. It was the pure, unwavering certainty in that child's eyes when she looked up. Zero hesitation, no searching at all. She wasn't trying to remember anything. The child already knew the truth. He remembered seeing that exact same innocent gaze on Lily once. Back when she was tiny, terrified, and sick, and her dad stepped into her pitch-black bedroom. Because as you and I know, kids don't just recognize a face. Their hearts feel the deepest truth first. You know how a child naturally leans toward warmth? Or how their tiny hands grab something familiar, even asleep. Kids that little don't build complicated adult stories. They either feel absolute truth or they don't react at all. Being a father, James understood that the pure certainty he saw in Ava wasn't just confusion. Her little heart had recognized something very real. Her heart remembered something true. He just needed adult proof. His grown-up brain couldn't process exactly how. Why would a stranger's kid carry an instinctual memory that pointed straight at a hospital maintenance worker? But sitting there, he realized that ignoring a little girl's raw intuition would be the easy adult escape, and completely wrong. He stared at his pendant. For years, he had worn it without ever truly knowing where it really came from. It showed up during a deeply confusing chapter of life. Right after a bad crash wiped out weeks of his own memory. Like any logical adult, he assumed it was his. Why wouldn't he? It was in his jacket, so logic said yes. Now his gut wasn't sure. He slid it off the cord, examining it under the harsh kitchen light. Six-sided shape, edges rubbed completely smooth. On the back, a faint letter, definitely not a J. He just kept turning it over, letting his intuition speak. By midnight, his gut instinct finally won. He clearly knew the risks. He knew CEO Charlotte Sinclair could instantly fire him from the hospital maintenance staff and ruin his livelihood. To the logical adult world, showing up again would look like exactly the kind of creepy behavior the boss suspected. But that child's absolute certainty stayed locked in his mind. As a dad, he knew trusting a kid's pure heart was worth the risk of looking completely crazy. He was going back. He sneaked back the next day using a fake repair ticket for the basement pipes. Just official enough to slip past the adult security guards. But he didn't head up to 4. He walked straight to the ground floor records office instead, where they stored all the boring, logical paperwork from years past. Grown-ups always ignore a guy in work boots, holding a clipboard and looking busy. James played the adult part perfectly. Nobody even blinked twice. He wasn't hunting for a clear fact. He was hunting for a shadow, the messy gap grown-ups leave behind when hiding the truth. Let's be honest, the biggest secrets aren't what you find, but what's conveniently hidden away. He spotted the lie inside the patient files. Ava Bennett, 6 years old, treated months ago for breathing issues, released 4 days later. Mom listed as Charlotte Sinclair, high-powered CEO. Dad listed as Nathaniel Brooks, marked entirely deceased. The death date was perfectly typed, an October Tuesday 3 whole years ago. 'Cause fatal car crash, James read it over twice. The timeline was way too perfect, like a smart adult was desperately covering their tracks. Nathaniel Brooks supposedly died 3 long years prior, meaning little Ava was 3 back then, exactly the age a child's heart burns truth into stone. You and I know truth isn't always words. For her, it was a smell, a feeling of pure safety, not just a face or name. Yet little Ava had said my real dad, not the dad who passed away. Not just a ghost who held her. She spoke with the heavy truth of right now. She said real, like her tiny heart knew the difference mattered. A gap between adult stories and what her spirit actually remembered. James studied the cold paper. Nathaniel Brooks, 34 years old when he died. The crash happened on Route 9 going west right around 2 in the morning, 1 car. The county coroner filed that quiet piece of paper. James had his own crash on Route 9 the exact same night. He froze in the dusty file room, the harsh lights buzzing right over his head. His memory of that dark night was broken. Doctors always blamed the heavy concussion he got when his truck crashed out. He woke up in another hospital 4 days later, ribs all bruised. A stitched-up left shoulder, and a blank spot in his mind the doctors swore might stay empty forever. He thought he was completely alone, but you and I know the adult logic was flawed. The paper in his hands whispered a different truth. He snapped a quick picture on his phone, hands perfectly still, and marched right back out. Charlotte tracked him down before he found her. He was walking through the hospital lobby when a voice called out, not his first name, but his last name, spoken sharply by an adult who spent all night digging for answers. Mr. Carter, he spun around. Charlotte Sinclair stood cold near the front desk. Her face locked into something much harder. Way more calculated than the messy shock she felt just yesterday. She was waiting. You aren't here for some simple basement work order. She snapped. The manager told me no order like that even exists. James stared back. You checked. Of course I checked. He just slowly nodded. Making up another grown-up lie would just be a waste. And he wasn't going to treat her like a foolish child. I came back because I found a clue I couldn't let go of. You snuck into a private hospital without permission because you kept thinking about my little girl. Her voice sounded calm, but it took massive adult control to keep it there. Do you get how awful that sounds? I know exactly how it sounds, he replied. But I also know your little girl wasn't confused yesterday. She wasn't pretending. She felt something very real and specific. You saw it. Even the doctor standing right there saw it. You adults just fear what it means. Charlotte's jaw tightened up. I'm not here to threaten anyone, James kept going. I don't care about your fancy job or this hospital. I'm telling you I found proof. Your late husband and I were on that exact same road that exact same night. That I had something in my jacket belonging to him, and your child's heart recognized it instantly. Those facts are real, even if your grown-up mind refuses to look. You can guess it. Charlotte stood there totally speechless. The busy grown-up world buzzed around them, completely blind to a child's pure truth. You and I know hospitals never stop. Grown-ups rush around, pausing only for literal emergencies. She stared at him. It was that classic grown-up look of facing an unexpected problem you can't categorize. A puzzle adults just can't solve. You have no clue what you're stepping into, she finally said. I'm not stepping into anything, James replied. I'm trying to grasp what I was already tangled up in 3 years ago, totally blind. Her face shifted. Not quite trust. Grown-ups rarely move that fast. but her icy resistance definitely thawed. A tiny crack in her armor, but it was absolutely real. "Ava asked about you this morning," she whispered. Her voice dropped low, before I even came downstairs. She asked if the man from yesterday was returning. James stayed completely silent. She hasn't asked about anyone like that in 3 whole years. The busy hospital swirled around them, but the two adults stood perfectly still. "Your little girl isn't confused," James repeated gently. "She's just remembering." The CEO stared at the maintenance worker. For once, adult logic paused, and she didn't order him away. No more words were spoken in that busy lobby. Charlotte just turned and walked away. James just watched her leave, making zero attempt to chase after her. We know parents will try anything. Next afternoon, she called his maintenance company, asking for him by name. The call hit his cell. Of course, the powerful executive didn't explain how she tracked down his personal number. She just asked to meet on neutral ground, far from the hospital walls, adding she'd totally understand if the single dad refused. But he didn't say no. They met at a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks away, hiding out at a table near the very back. Charlotte walked in exactly on time. She dressed differently today, no power suit, no screens. The adult armor was completely gone. Stripped down, she looked much younger, yet deeply, painfully exhausted. Not corporate burnout, but that bone-deep tiredness a parent feels when holding an emotional secret alone for years. She slid a heavy folder onto the table. It held public records and printed papers, patched together with clues she clearly hunted down herself. James flipped through them in silence. Nathaniel Brooks was an environmental systems expert. It was a tricky job, caught right between high-level engineering and strict government safety rules. His agency worked with almost every major facility in the area, including 3 years before he suddenly died. A massive hospital integration job that brought in dozens of different outside crews, including the exact maintenance crew James worked for back then. James spent 8 weeks on that job, but he never actually crossed paths with Nathaniel Brooks face to face. He stayed hidden in the boiler rooms, digging through blueprints, instead of chatting with corporate consultants. But the records told the truth. Both men shared that worksite. They probably walked past each other in those same hospital hallways that fall. "He talked about you," Charlotte said. James slowly looked up. "Not by name. He came home one night and said there was a Nanton guy on site who understood everything better than the engineers who actually designed it. He wasn't envious at all. Nathaniel just wasn't like that." He was genuinely amazed. She just stared down at her black coffee. "Mr. James told Mom that man could stand quietly in a room without taking over. He noticed things. Mr. James stayed quiet. Mr. James said that was the very rarest kind of smart. The busy coffee shop made little clinking noises around us. Mr. James looked at Mom's papers, the project timeline, and the awful crash date. The police papers couldn't explain why a super careful man who never drove dangerously would just drive off that dark road all alone. But my heart knew something else happened. There was something else on that road," Mr. James whispered. He said he always felt it, but couldn't remember what. Mommy reached into her folder and pulled out one more paper. A secret accident report she paid for, hidden from everyone else. Mr. James read it super slowly. Another car had been there too. Nobody knew for sure why. The crash clues were ruined by the time the helpers arrived. But the secret paper showed tire tracks from another car that drove away before ambulances even came. The police just closed it without giving answers. Mr. James set the paper down. "He gave me the pendant," he whispered. "He wasn't asking a question." Mommy gave a tiny sad nod. "I think he must have," Mommy said. "I just don't know how. Or how much time he had." The 2 grown-ups sat completely silent. "How did you know to keep it?" Mom asked. "I didn't," he answered. "I just couldn't bring myself to take it off." It took the grown-ups several days to put the whole puzzle together, not learning it all at once. Big adult secrets just bubble up so slowly, almost like they feel afraid. A new clue only popped out when they finally accepted the last scary one. The awful crash had happened at 2:17 in the morning. Nathaniel Brooks was driving west on Route 9, coming back from a late meeting 40 miles away. Mr. James was driving on that exact same road, going the opposite way. He was heading home late from fixing things as a maintenance worker. The dark roads had just 2 lanes and 0 streetlights, but the night sky was super clear. but freezing black ice was hiding there, totally invisible until it was way too late. Nathaniel's car slipped and flew off the road first. Mr. James, coming the other way, saw it happen, saw those headlights pointing up at a totally impossible angle. He slammed his brakes, swerved hard, and crashed into the ditch himself. He bumped his head really hard. A big sideways crash cracked his window and hurt his brain, which the hospital doctors wrote down, and then, as time passed, they completely stopped worrying. But that big bump totally erased his memory of everything that happened right after the moment he saw those headlights up until he finally woke up in his hospital bed. Everything went blank. But my heart knew someone had been right there. Somebody moved around in that dark, missing time, acting. Somebody made brave choices. The secret clues proved it wasn't just some scared guy who had simply been in a wreck. Mr. James's jacket was found left inside Nathaniel's ruined car. Mom's secret report wrote that weird detail down, but it never explained why. A gray maintenance jacket sat folded on the back seat, with heavy tools and a work card tucked in the pocket. That work card belonged to Mr. James. The adults assumed the jacket belonged to the driver, photographing and logging it, and then stopped. Because grown-ups only find what they expect to find, it faded from official records. James must have dragged himself from his wrecked vehicle, dizzy and bleeding, stumbling across the road to reach the other car. He must have found Nathaniel Brooks barely clinging to life. Adult evidence couldn't paint the full picture, but it proved that much. And little Ava had been right there in the back. Charlotte shared that part quietly, using that careful, measured tone adults rely on when things get tough. Ava was with her father that night under very unusual circumstances. All because of a canceled overnight trip that unexpectedly brought him. Nathaniel returned home early down a dark road Charlotte knew nothing about. Ava had been sleeping soundly in her car seat, not a single scratch. When the rescue crews finally arrived, they found her, calm, perfectly safe, wrapped in a gray maintenance worker's jacket carrying a distinct smell. The paramedics wrote it down, totally baffled by the inexplicable scent. She smelled faintly of machine oil and cedar wood. James had bundled the little girl up safely. As a single father himself, he finally understood it, the missing pieces snapping into place. He held her tight until the freezing cold and extreme shock finally caught up with him, and everything faded completely to black. He was the very last thing little Ava felt before they carried her away. The smell of his jacket, his warm weight. That unspoken feeling of absolute safety he carried so naturally. It had anchored deep into her heart, far beyond what any adult could ever understand. Not a face or a name, just a pure feeling she spent 3 whole years waiting to find again. She wasn't confused, James realized. He had said it before, but suddenly it held pure truth. Charlotte stared at him from across the table. Her eyes shined with an emotion her adult mind wasn't ready to name. No, she finally whispered. She wasn't. Little Ava met him again in the hospital's tiny outdoor garden courtyard. A paved spot with wooden benches and winter flowers, tended with far more hope than the freezing weather actually deserved. Charlotte had organized it perfectly. Grown-ups always need perfect conditions for important things, so she planned every single detail. Ava walked down the hallway, gripping her mother's hand, wearing her own clothes today instead of a hospital gown. They were heading home that afternoon, since her breathing cleared, and her mother felt she would heal better at home. This courtyard meeting wasn't some official hospital procedure they scheduled. It was something Charlotte simply needed. You and I know how kids are. Ava saw James drop her mom's hand and walked over, no running. She moved with much more purpose than their first encounter. Moving with that serious weight of a little girl who thought about this for days and knew the absolute truth. She stopped right in front of him. "Mama said you were there," she said softly. "When Daddy's car broke." James kneeled down to meet her small, knowing eyes. "Yes," he said, "I was there. You kept me warm. I did my best." She weighed those words quietly. You see, kids bring such deep, patient wisdom to the things they know really matter. "I thought I made it up," she whispered, the smell and the warmth. "I thought my memory was just wrong." The little girl paused. "Mommy says I didn't just pretend it." "You didn't pretend it," James told me. "Are you going to go away again?" He looked over at Mommy. She was standing on the path nearby. Mommy was watching us like she'd been carrying a really heavy box for a long time, and finally put it down. I'm not replacing anyone, James said. He said it to me and to the empty space where Mommy stood. I'm not your daddy, he was your daddy. I would never take that from you. I nodded my head very seriously. I know, I said. You smell different now anyway. He smelled like the rain. James laughed a quick, real laugh that surprised even him. But you still smell safe, I told him. Grown-ups always think kids don't know things, but I just said exactly what was true. He didn't say anything back, he really didn't have to. Behind me, Mommy made a tiny quiet sound, like she wanted to cry but didn't. She turned around a little bit and covered her mouth with her hand. James didn't look right at her. Grown-ups do that when someone is being sad. I didn't really care, though. I was already busy looking at the pretty winter flowers in the big pot. My mind just jumped to the next fun thing to look at. The whole garden around the three of us was super quiet and cold. James stood up slowly, then he and Mommy stood next to the wooden bench together. They weren't touching, just watching me bend down to see if I should pick a purple flower. Thank you, Mommy said. Her voice sounded totally different now. Like she dropped that heavy box and didn't have to carry it anymore. James just stayed quiet. He just watched my little hand float over the pretty purple flower until I decided to leave it growing in the dirt. After that day, the grown-ups didn't have any big talks or make new rules. Nobody promised anything or used big words to explain what was happening with us. James kept working his job. Lily kept going to school. Mommy went back to being a boss at work, doing the same things for 3 years. But she looked softer now. She didn't march around like a soldier anymore. I guess you don't need a hard shell when you aren't scared of everything anymore. I asked Mommy about James every single day after we finally left the hospital. Mommy told the truth. She said he was our friend, a man who had helped us out. She promised we would see him again soon. That was completely fine by me. I'm only 6. Tomorrow just means waiting for my next favorite snack, or fun games, or a good sleep. Just knowing that my safe friend was coming back was totally enough. He finally came over on a chilly Saturday afternoon in the middle of November. The sun looked like orange honey outside, and our whole street was super quiet because everyone was just chilling at home. He brought Lily along. Mommy suggested it very nicely. She used her normal grown-up voice, which she does when she's trying to hide being shy. Lily and I played out in the backyard while Mommy made some coffee. James stood in the doorway just watching us and not saying anything. The quiet felt really nice, the way it only does when grown-ups have finally survived a scary hospital trip together. James the maintenance man kept coming back, week after week. Mom the busy CEO and James made things so tricky. They talked super carefully, but always straight up. I'd hear them talk about heavy, sad things from their pasts that they still hadn't figured out how to fix. But they never ever lied. I guess James knew the truth mattered way more than comfort. And me, I just watched. I soaked it all in. My little heart just understood things by feeling them, ignoring messy grown-up explanations. I never called James my dad. I just didn't have a neat label for him yet. Grown-ups use words to put things in neat little boxes, and James just didn't fit into any I knew about. Then one freezing December afternoon, the winter wind chased all 4 of us back inside the house, laughing and dumping our big coats everywhere. I grabbed James's big hand, then Lily's. And Mommy's hand, too. I stood right by the front door, feeling totally proud of how I'd glued us all together. "This is perfect," I said. Nobody laughed and nobody cried, even though the grown-ups probably really wanted to. Later on, my mom asked me what I actually meant. I looked at her, feeling that weird patience you need when grown-ups miss the obvious. "You know," I smiled. "Home." I looked right at Mommy with absolute clarity. It was just the simple truth. My little heart already knew that the biggest, most important feelings never need a bunch of messy words. "He feels like home." Mommy didn't say anything back right away. She just held my face gently in her hands. Her eyes got super shiny while the whole house stayed perfectly quiet around us. Mommy never actually told James what I said about him. I guess some big truths just need to settle